Chapter 12, Part 2. Jim liked the look of this boy. A few times he went over to say something, but the boy would just run off as he got nearer, as if he'd just remembered a job that needed doing. Jim would feel awkward then, and would pretend to be searching on the ground for something where the boy had been squatting. But every day he thought, I'll talk to him today. I'll find out what he's called. One evening, just as dark was coming, the lad was sitting watching Jim in his nervous fox-like way, when a raggedy woman crept up behind him. She put her hands on his shoulders and shook him. "Gotcha," she said. "You been hiding, ain't ya?" He jumped up and tried to get away, but she pushed him to the ground and pinned him there with her knee on his chest. Her hair was as wild and as red as his, and her voice was thick and slurred. "Where's your money?" she demanded. "Ain't got none," the boy said. She flipped him over as if he was a wooden doll, felt in his back pockets and held up some coins. "Now you've got none," she laughed, and before he could sit up, she'd gone. Jim had been crouching on the other side of the road, watching. The boy saw him looking and turned away, covering up his face with his hands. He stayed hunched up just as the woman had left him. Jim stood up and clicked his fingers to make the boy look at him. Then he started to dance, just a few skipping steps. "Laugh," he wanted to say, but he daren't. "It's all right, laugh." It was then that the boy seemed to make up his mind about him. He jumped up and joined Jim, kicking up his legs in imitation of Jim's dance, holding his arms high above his head so his laces fluttered round like maypole ribbons. His pink, shrimpy toes wriggled above the flaps of his boots, and with each step he slapped his foot down so firmly on the road that the muck spattered round him like flies around a cow. He danced with his eyes closed and his mouth wide open, in a kind of trance. And the more the watchers clapped, the wilder his dance became. Jim could hardly keep up with him for laughing, and even Rosie had to smile. She'd sold off most of her tray load to one family. "Here," she said, "shrimps or whatever your name is. And you, Skipping Jim, you can finish these for me. I'm going back to get some more. I've never sold 2 whole trayfuls like that in one day. Never. You could go on the shows, you two. You should join a travelling circus." The two boys sat side by side near a watchman's fire, peeling the shrimps with their teeth and spitting off the shells. "I love shrimps, I do," the boy said, "but I've never pinched none off Rosie, never." "You wouldn't dare," said Jim. "She'd pickle you if you did." "I dare do anything I do, said the boy said. "But Rosie's like me. She ain't got no more money than I have." "Are you really called Shrimps?" Jim asked. The boy shrugged. "Shrimps is what they call me, and Shrimps'll do." "Sounds like a funny name to me," Jim said. "Who was that woman?" The boy narrowed his eyes. "My ma," he said. "Only she kicked me out years ago, didn't she? She only comes looking for me when she wants money for gin. Not much of a ma, she ain't." "Where do you live then?" "Depends, don't it? See, if I makes a copper or two selling laces, I spent it on a lodging house for the night." "Caw, on your own?" said Jim. "On me own with about 50 other geezers what snore their heads off all night. It's like a thunderstorm sometimes. And if I don't have no money, I sleeps where I can, don't I? Where the bobbies won't find me. That's where I live." He jerked his thumb at Jim's jacket, where the sacking shawl had slipped away. "I spent a week in that place, worse than anything I've ever known. That workhouse was. Worse than sleeping in a barn full of rats, and I done that a time or two." "Worse than that," Jim agreed. "Worse than sleeping in a sack full of eels." Both boys giggled. "Eels?" snorted Shrimps. "Eels is charming company. I ate an eel once, while it was still alive. It wriggled all down my throat and round my belly and up again and out through my mouth." "Bellies," said the eel. "Boys' bellies is nearly as bad as the workhouse, and it wriggled off home. It was all right, that eel." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and looked at Jim sideways. You got a brother? Skipping Jim. No, said Jim. Have you? Used to have, but I ain't got one now. Shrimps dug the flaps of his boot soles into the mud. I'd like a brother to go round with. So would I, said Jim. The two boys stared straight ahead, saying nothing. The watchman poked his fire so the flames hissed. He slowly got to his feet. 5 of the clock, he shouted. 5 o'clock, my lovelies. Got to go, Shrimp said. I got a queue to see to. People often breaks their bootlaces when they're standing in queues. Just snap off, they do. If I crawls round and tweaks them when they ain't looking. Will you be here tomorrow? Shrimps looked down at Jim. He took a bunch of laces out of his pocket and swirled them around. Then he shrugged and ran off. That night, as Jim ran home to his shed, his head was busy with new thoughts. There was easily enough room for another boy to squeeze in. Rosie wouldn't mind, especially if Shrimp got his food in the usual way. Be nice to have a brother, he thought as he ran. Real nice that would be. It would be a long time before he slept so well again. His sleep that night was broken by stomping of boots and the screech the catch gave as the door was pulled open. A candle was held out towards Jim. 2 men were looking down at him, their eyes black holes in the candlelight. Jim recognised one as Rosie's grandfather. The other man was square with a box-like face and hair that slanted across his eyes. This the boy you mean? He gave Jim a kick. Jim sat up in fright, clutching his sack around him. I knew I'd seen a lad running in here, Rosie's grandfather wheezed. A little rat he is, skulking in my shed. I'll weasel him out, I thought to myself. I'll winkle him out when the time's right. Please, mister, said Jim, I ain't doing no harm. Stand up, the square man said. Jim struggled to his feet. He's only a twig. There's no bones on him hardly. He'll grow, said the grandfather. He'll grow big and powerful. You can train him up, Nick. He won't give you no trouble that size. He's just right. And while he's training, he won't eat much. Nick grunted. Well, he's here, and I'm stuck for a boy, so I'll take him. Grandpa sighed with pleasure. Nick fumbled in his pocket and gave him a coin. Come on, boy, Nick said. Bring your bed. You'll need it. Jim stumbled after him, pulling the sack around his shoulders for warmth, and the door screeched behind him as the old man fastened it. Tell Rosie, Jim began, and Grandpa swung round and snarled at him. She won't need no telling. I'll thank her, shall I, for stealing my food from her grandmother's mouth to stuff in yours? Go on, go with Grimy Nick. You've got a home and a job now. You've nothing more to want in life, that's what. He walked slowly back to his cottage, laughing aloud in his coughing way, spinning the coin that Grimy Nick had given him, so it gleamed in the air like a little sun.